Lust is not merely an impulse, it is a force that studies a man, measures his weak points, and waits for the exact moment he forgets who he is trying to become. It enters quietly, wearing the disguise of harmless pleasure, but its true work begins when a man starts negotiating with his own standards. Each compromise appears small, but every surrender trains the mind to obey desire instead of directing it. And when a man obeys desire more than conscience, he is no longer operating from will, he is operating from addiction. What most men never understand is that lust is not about the body, it is about the collapse of inner command. It rewires attention, dissipates focus, and erodes the subtle discipline required to act with intention. A man can appear strong, ambitious, talented, respected, but if his inner world bows to impulse, his strength is borrowed, his discipline is inconsistent, and his identity becomes unstable. The outer life cannot stay upright when the inner structure is fractured. Ancient orders of men knew this. They saw lust as an enemy of clarity, not morality. They understood that a man who cannot restrain himself cannot protect anything. Not his name, not his path, not the people he loves. Restraint was not a punishment. It was the gateway to authority over one's own mind. To command your life, you must first command the source of your distractions. Lust thrives where vigilance dies, and a man without vigilance becomes predictable, easy to manipulate, easy to shake. The moment a man's desires lead him instead of follow him, he forfeits the sharpness required to stand with honor. Real strength begins with the refusal to let instinct rule the throne where discipline should sit. Lust dismantles a man from the inside because it does not merely tempt him, it reorganizes his priorities without his permission. A man who was once sharp becomes scattered. A man who once lived with intention begins drifting. His energy splinters into impulses, fantasies, and shallow pursuits that drain the strength he needs for real battles. The consequence is subtle at first: missed opportunities, weakened discipline, a mind that can no longer stay still. But with time, this inner erosion becomes visible in every arena of his life. When lust governs a man, he loses the ability to see clearly. He begins treating his mind as a playground instead of a command center. His standards lower, not because he chooses weakness, but because he stops noticing its progression. Lust blinds a man to what he is becoming. It reshapes his relationship with discipline, with women, with purpose. It replaces reverence with consumption, patience with agitation, and honor with secrecy. A man cannot build anything meaningful while living in contradiction with his own principles. Ancient warriors understood this danger well. They guarded their desires as fiercely as they guarded their weapons. They knew that unrestrained appetite turns a man into his own adversary. To them, desire was not the enemy, disorder was. And disorder begins when a man no longer governs what he allows to rule him. When desire becomes master instead of servant, identity fractures. A man loses the clarity required to lead himself, much less others. This is the silent cost of lust. It consumes the very qualities that make a man reliable: his focus, his presence, his authority, his restraint. A man trying to rise cannot afford to leak strength through his impulses. He must rebuild internal order, reclaim his attention, and forge a mind capable of resisting the drift that lust creates. Without this restoration, greatness becomes impossible, because greatness requires a unified, disciplined self. If you're done living divided, take the next step. Begin the 60-day discipline challenge and reclaim the strength you keep postponing. This is not motivation, it is an initiation. Link pinned in the first comment. Rebuilding a man's will begins with a single truth. Strength is not born from desire, but from discipline, repeated until it becomes instinct. The modern world tells men their urges define them. Ancient wisdom teaches the opposite. A man becomes powerful when his urges obey him. The first threshold of mastery is learning to delay gratification, not as punishment, but as the sharpening of inner steel. When a man trains himself to wait, he trains himself to rule. A disciplined man does not chase stimulation. He directs his attention like a blade. He creates routines not because he is rigid, but because he understands that chaos thrives wherever structure is absent. Lust feeds on unstructured men, those who wander through their days without intention, without boundaries, without rituals that anchor their mind. The man who rises is the man who establishes order in small things first: his sleep, his mornings, his work, his body, his digital environment. Order breeds clarity. Clarity breeds power. The mind becomes a fortress only when a man stops giving every impulse access to its gates. He builds walls through restraint, watchfulness, and the willingness to endure discomfort. Strength does not grow in comfort, it grows in resistance. Every time a man denies an impulse, the walls strengthen. Every time he honors his routines, his inner guard becomes more alert. Eventually, lust no longer finds easy entry because the man no longer leaves the door cracked open. There comes a moment in every disciplined man's life when the noise of craving begins to quiet, not because temptation disappears, but because his identity shifts. He no longer sees himself as a man trying to resist. He sees himself as a man who commands. This shift is crucial. Self-control becomes natural when a man stops negotiating with weakness and starts building the structures that make strength inevitable. A man cannot reclaim his strength without correcting how he sees women. Lust reduces the feminine to an object of appetite, stripping away reverence, dignity, and the recognition of shared humanity. When a man sees women through the lens of impulse, he sabotages his own honor long before he harms anyone else. His ability to form genuine connection weakens. His sense of responsibility dulls. His capacity to build legacy fractures. No man becomes trustworthy while viewing others as tools for his craving. Discipline restores the correct posture. When a man restrains lust, he doesn't suppress masculinity, he elevates it. He learns to encounter women with clarity, not consumption. He becomes capable of respect because he no longer looks at the world through hunger. This shift is not sentimental, it is structural. A disciplined man relates to women from strength, not scarcity. He makes decisions rooted in principle, not impulse. His presence becomes stable, grounded, consistent. This recalibration influences every dimension of his life. The man who honors the feminine becomes more intentional about the masculine. He strengthens his boundaries, protects his commitments, and chooses relationships aligned with who he is becoming. Men who live enslaved to lust cannot understand loyalty, presence, or long-term purpose, because these virtues require a mind free from compulsion. Respect is a byproduct of mastery. Legacy depends on this transformation. A man who leads a family, a company, a community, or even his own future must possess a disciplined internal world. Lust turns kings into beggars. Discipline turns ordinary men into steady pillars capable of carrying weight. When a man governs his desires, he becomes capable of building something that outlives him. Self-mastery is not about purity. It is about power. The power to remain unwavering, the power to honor, the power to build, and the power to resist becoming a threat to your own future. Every man reaches a crossroads. Either he governs his desires or his desires govern him. There is no neutral state. Lust promises escape, relief, adventure, but its true outcome is fragmentation. A man divided against himself cannot stand. His potential remains theoretical. His discipline remains inconsistent. His identity remains unfixed. To break this cycle, a man must choose a different allegiance, not to impulse but to principle, not to craving but to structure, not to secrecy but to inner alignment. A man does not defeat lust by emotion, he defeats it by architecture. Systems replace shame, ritual replaces fear, identity replaces impulse. When a man decides that honor is no longer negotiable, his behavior begins to reorganize around that decision. His standards rise, his actions sharpen, his tolerance for weakness decreases. He builds an oath within himself, a private, unspoken commitment to stop living as the understudy of his own life. In this pursuit, men throughout history found a figure who embodied absolute self-command. A man who lived with unbroken focus, unshakable discipline, unwavering restraint, and uncorrupted purpose. They may not have known his name at first, but they recognized the pattern, the strength of one who mastered himself completely. That model has echoed across centuries, calling to any man who seeks a backbone beyond his own abilities. When men speak of ultimate discipline, they speak of the same archetype, whether they realize it or not. The truth is simple. Lust collapses a man inward. Discipline expands him. Lust makes him reactive. Discipline makes him sovereign. Lust hides him from his own potential. Discipline forces him to face it. A man who chooses discipline is choosing to become someone his future can depend on. That is the threshold. That is the turning point. That is the moment a man stops surviving his own impulses and begins forging the identity he was meant to wield. Begin with the battlefield you can control, your environment. Remove the triggers that weaken your vigilance, digital, physical, and emotional. Create friction between you and your impulses. A man who eliminates easy access eliminates half the war. Then establish a daily structure that strengthens the will. Morning routines, physical training, disciplined work blocks, and deliberate rest. These practices anchor the mind and reduce the space where chaos breeds. Next, replace passive consumption with active engagement. Read, build, train, converse with men who sharpen you. Lust thrives in isolation. Strength grows in brotherhood. Finally, practice the discipline of interruption. When an impulse rises, stop, breathe, redirect. Every interruption is a brick in the fortress you are constructing. Progress is not instant, but every deliberate act makes you a man your future can trust. There comes a moment when a man realizes no enemy has damaged him more than the one he allowed inside. Lust may have taken years from you, clarity from you, discipline from you, but it does not decide who you become next. The power to rise has always been in your hands. Strength is reclaimed through choices repeated until they transform identity. Stand firm, rebuild order, and become a man whose actions reflect conviction rather than craving. Every step toward mastery is a step away from the life that once held you captive. The path is narrow, but it is the only one that leads to a man who stands unbroken.